the bases dropped on a cold morning in Atlanta, Georgia. I guess winter is a thing. We'd kind of been fooled here lately that it was not a thing. I think it is now a thing again. Because welcome to weather these days. It's just all over the place. Soccer Down here, Thursday Thoughts edition of the show. We're taking your thoughts on Twitter at Soccer Down here. Jason Longshore, John Nelson, Jarrett Smith with you this morning. And I want to start with a question for John and Jarrett. Manchester City won 9-0 yesterday in the Carabao Cup. 9-0. And it's a two-leg, so they have to play a second leg. John, is this a bad thing? Is this a good thing? Was Pep Guardiola a jerk? Was this just how things go? What were your thoughts when you saw this playing out at 9-0?
My first reaction was, yee.
In what way?
But, well, first and foremost, after sticker shock, you look at it and I'm kind of sitting there going, if you can't stop what's going on, and I know that Pep had rotated his 11 into this, and there were some of the stars that weren't even there, and I can understand a lower division club, you're outclassed and outmanned in every single way, and I think that things like this happen. I know that we've had a couple of 7-0s in competitions involving Spurs and things like that. And I just think that there are just times where lower division clubs are completely and totally outmatched, and it doesn't matter which 11 or which 18 you throw out there. And it ends up being the end result. And I mean, we've seen it in college football where teams put up big numbers, and if the team that's out there on defense can't stop the team that's on offense, then this is what happens, even if you pull your playbook back. So I just take it at face value right now. I'm not sitting there and saying that Pep's running up the score or anything like that or trying to prove a point. It's just that when you go up against Burton Albion and your Manchester City, things like this could happen.
Jarrett, what did you think when you saw this?
Well, I mean, I didn't see it. This is the first time I'm hearing about it.
I'm
trying to process.
Just in general. So it's a League One team in Burton Albion losing in the semifinal. I mean, it's a great run for Burton Albion to get to the semifinal of the League Cup. The League Cup's kind of odd. We don't have an equivalent here. The Open Cup would be the equivalent of the FA Cup. This is a third-tier competition in England, I guess is a fair way to put it. Do you have a problem, Jarrett, with 9-0 in this match?
It depends on game state, because there's times where, somebody can just have such a bad day that it doesn't matter if you take the foot off the gas. Things still get sideways, and I think it's hard to ask a professional athlete to stop playing, basically.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it depends on the game state now, because if you're up, 6-7-0, and you're still putting the foot down, I mean, yeah, you're going to get criticized for that, probably roundly so. Just because it's different.
Why roundly so? This is something that I wanted to dig into because I saw some of the different criticisms here. And it really reminded me of some of the criticisms after Atlanta defeated New England 7-0 in 2017. And I don't know what you're supposed to do here, honestly.
The Atlanta-New England one kind of falls into that category for me of New England just felt like New England quit playing in that game. Like Jay Heath's career as that coach of that team was pretty much done.
Sure.
But I think there would have been a difference had Atlanta been, pressing like it was a tied game in the 83rd minute or playing like it was the second minute. And Atlanta really didn't try to bury New England, and New England just kind of let them. Kevin Kratz hitting that free kick he took a shot on goal because it was within a range of a shot on goal. There was nothing irrational about it to me. But that game never felt to me like, Atlanta's intentionally going after 8 here No, New England just kind of let them. So without having watched the game yesterday, I mean, I can't sit here and tell you like, yeah, Manchester United just kind of left the foot down. Like or City, excuse me. Yeah, they're about the same, right? Not really a difference.
Oh yeah. Have fun with that one. Jarrett _ Smith on
words.
Twitter, by the way. De Bruyne scored in the 5th minute. You were 4-0 at halftime, and it ended up 9.
I mean, if the other team just doesn't show up and does nothing to stop even kind of a laid back approach, that's between them and that's between them and their maker really at that point. And you still have to go play the game. But I think there's a difference between going and just playing the game and, hey, we're up 6-0. Let's keep the foot down. I mean,
it's tough because I don't really know what you're supposed to do in this situation. It's Manchester City, who was the best team. You could definitely say one of the best teams in Premier League history last season. One of the most star-studded rosters you can ever imagine against a League One team. And the League One team did an amazing job to get to the semifinals of the Carabao Cup, but they were in way over their heads, and it showed. And it's a 2-leg, tie here. So second leg now, Manchester City could start their academy team. I don't know eligibility rules for the Carabao Cup, how that works, but you could play the absolute bottom of your roster of guys who are eligible and be fine, and you get that game of rest. That is
be cool. It'd be hilarious if they lost somehow.
I don't think they're going to lose 10-0. So, but that is why this is important, and this is something that, as I started thinking about it, and is it good to lose 9-0? No. Is it bad for the fans and everybody who was there? Absolutely. It wasn't a fun day. But this gives Manchester City a game off, essentially. And the League Cup so many times turns into a slog because you're playing 2 legs. You're adding these games in, and it's a third-tier competition. It's not the FA Cup. It's not the League, and it's not Champions League or Europa League for teams involved in that. So a lot of times you don't see it taken seriously. Now Manchester City can move on to the final and give those young guys an opportunity to play a match. It will be, somewhat competitive. I mean, it's a real game, but it's your qualification is assured. And at 3-0, 4-0, it's a different conversation than 9-0. That does factor into it. But this is professional sports. And even, if you want to talk college football is essentially professional sports. We all know that. So it's not a 9-0 game in a U12 game, which is bad. And, even that sometimes is unavoidable. You qualified here, you get to play with the big boys, and you're not one of the big boys, and you get punished for it. I don't know what Manchester City's supposed to do. It was the same feeling when I read the criticism that I had after, I believe it was Gabriel Marcotti criticized Atlanta United for winning 7-0. You get to a point where it's, what are you supposed to do? Like, actively not try to play the game? Not try to score? You can't ask anybody to do that. That's not how you play. It's an interesting situation all the way around. Manchester City now, and we talked about it in terms of rotating squads with Atlanta United and what this season could bring. They're going to get a game where they get to rest guys. Yesterday, you can only make a couple of subs. So you're not, even at 4-0 at halftime, you're not going to be able to make wholesale changes. You have to go with what you can go with. And I also read that they weren't able to rotate as many reserve players in yesterday as they would have liked because the reserve team played the day before. So you didn't have some players available due to that. So that factored into your lineup choice probably as well. But to be able to go into a game, knowing that you're going to advance, knowing that you're good, and be able to rotate the squad, that's kind of a blessing for Pep Guardiola with the crowded fixture list that they have. And I don't see a CONCACAF match ending like this, not with the draw Atlanta United has. If you had a match against, Atletico Pantoja or one of the lesser teams that are in the round of 16, and you're able to thrash them in the first leg and essentially take the second leg off, that's amazing. That's great. And the Red Bulls
I'm just
have
hoping
that
Atlanta
opportunity.
scores in Herediano.
Yeah. Atlanta's not going to have this opportunity when it comes to Herediano, but if for some reason it does, if Herediano falls apart and you're able to go down there and, as some people said, you go down there and win 3-0 or 4-0, you keep the hammer down. If you get 2 and you feel like blood's in the water, you keep the hammer down and you go for as much as you can, because it might give you that game afterwards where you truly can rest players. And that's always a blessing for a team with a crowded fixture list. That just kind of grabbed my attention with that game and that scoreline. I mean, anytime you see a 9-0 in a competitive match, it's like, wow, okay, this is a little different. I think it's one reason why we're not going to see a League Cup of any sort here, at least in the same format as England. Although USL is talking about it within the Championship and League One, their professional teams having basically like a USL Cup, which I think would be a great addition for those teams. That would be a nice fit. But MLS teams, especially at the top, have such a crowded fixture list, you're not adding more to it as it currently stands. The other big thing going on right now is the U.S. men's national team. First camp under Greg Berhalter. You're starting to get some comments. You're starting to get some interviews that players are giving. You're starting to hear more things out of it. You have a couple of matches coming up for the national team. Jarrett, what are your expectations out of this? I mean, are you just looking at it as an opportunity for Greg Berhalter to play a couple games, just get his feet wet? Are you looking for any semblance of what the team is going to look like down the road? What do you expect to get out of this January, early February camp for Greg Berhalter and the men's national team?
For Berhalter himself, just kind of show his hand a bit and what he can do. I mean, and what you can expect going forward. It's a different thing for the players, though, for me personally, in that the players got to go out there and show the hell out, because, look, this is a national team camp here. And if you don't do that, I mean, there's no guarantee you come back to the next national team camp. So with Berhalter, technically, I mean, I expect, to see what we should see for the foreseeable future under him. But as far as the players are concerned, I expect all of them to show out, because if they don't, there's not a guarantee you're coming back to the next camp.
John, what about you? How important is this for the men's national team? There are reports that they will play 2 matches in March against Chile and Ecuador. It looks like one will be in Orlando, one in Houston. Doug McIntyre of Yahoo Sports has that. So you're going to get a couple games in an international window where you can bring Christian Pulisic and Tyler Adams and Weston McKennie and others in. But how important is this first camp for Greg Berhalter?
And I'm trying to figure out how to phrase the word important, because I'm of the Jarrett camp here. I think for Berhalter, looking at what he wants to do, I'd like to see some ideas of, okay, here's my philosophy, here's what I want to do, here's how I want things to look. And for the players themselves, it is the opportunity. This is their audition. And I don't know if I'm necessarily looking for some kind of a result other than nobody get injured, please. But I'm looking for players to take the lessons that Greg Berhalter wants to implement, do them as best they can, so they can get that call back. So result to me isn't really something I'm paying attention to. I'm looking at it more so I can see something resembling the development of a plan for Berhalter and how he wants to do things philosophically. And for the players who have that want to gene, I want to see the want to gene in the fixtures in March.
Let's take it a step further. You have these 2 games in March, a couple of games ahead of the Gold Cup, and then you're into a competitive situation. The first time the U.S. has had a competitive match since Trinidad. Is the Gold Cup a must-win, a need-to-win, or is the style of play, system of play, philosophy being implemented, is that the most important thing this summer? What do you think, John? I mean, how big of a deal is the Gold Cup trophy in the summer for the U.S. men's national team?
I think the Gold Cup itself is a big deal. I'm not necessarily looking at a trophy. I'd like to see a deep run into the tournament. I'd like to see some cohesion. I'd like to see some consistency when it comes to lineups and implementation. But for me, give me a deep run, and I'll take a trophy as a pleasant byproduct of everything coming together faster than a lot of folks might have thought.
What about you, Jarrett? How important is lifting the Gold Cup trophy this summer?
Lifting it would be wonderful. I need you to get me to the semifinal. You got the talent to do that.
Yeah.
You've got a manager in place now, a permanent manager. You've got a little bit of time, half a year to kind of try and install. I need you to get me to the semifinal. If you don't, it is a failure.
I'll agree with that. I would even go so far as to say the final is what's necessary, or it's a failure. I think the reason why it could not be a failure but still get to a semifinal is if you have seen from January games to March games to June games ahead of the tournament progress and a clear identity. I might be able to give a little wiggle room on results in the Gold Cup. But this is where Berhalter's in a really tough spot because of the long wait, because of the failure to qualify for 2018. He has to do both. He has to create that identity for what this team is on the field, because you didn't see it under Saracen, because that's not what was on his job. You didn't see it under Bruce Arena. You didn't see it under Jurgen Klinsmann, although that's what he promised. You haven't seen really an identity of a U.S. men's national team since Bob Bradley. You need to see that, because that's how you're going to get the best out of the player pool. And he has to do that alongside winning games, flat out. Winning competitive games. Friendlies, I don't care. You don't want to get run off the field by Chile or Ecuador, but you gotta compete. But the Gold Cup, you have to show something. You can't go in there and say, whatever happens, happens. We're just worried about, identity. You have to do both. And that's going to be such a big challenge for Berhalter, who hasn't been in this situation before. And right after the Gold Cup, you have the first edition of the CONCACAF Nations League. And we've seen in Europe how that has been, I think, a little bit bigger deal than we all expected. What does that turn into here? I think it's another opportunity to create a U.S.-Mexico competitive match when you get to the Nations League Final Four in the summer of 2020. That's important. Or competitive match with Costa Rica or Panama or whoever it is, but likely Mexico. You're going to have these competitive situations, and I worry that if it is identity first, system first, philosophy first, you have a bad Gold Cup, that's going to ratchet up the pressure. And I think Berhalter's really going to have to find a way here to do both, but not sacrifice results. And that's why I really do think that it's even past just a semifinal appearance. I think you have to get to the final. If you get to the final and you lose to Mexico, okay. Especially if you've seen progress. If you lose in a semifinal to Mexico, okay, that's a little bit different conversation. If for some reason you end up in that situation. But if you lose a semifinal to anybody else in CONCACAF, and Costa Rica would be the next best one. If you lose the semifinal to Costa Rica, or if you lose it to a Jamaica or a Panama, I mean, can you imagine what the outcry is going to be? That's the tough spot that Greg Berhalter's in, and that's why I think this camp is probably more important than other January camps, because he needs to figure out of the group he has here, who is part of this core that's going to go forward. Then where does a Pulisic fit in? Where does a Tyler Adams fit in when you get to March and when you get to the Gold Cup? And he just doesn't have a lot of time to do all that and implement his style of play, his system. It's going to be interesting. But I'll be watching these games in January closer than I've watched U.S. men's national team games in the January camp in a long time. I think these are probably the most important games we've seen at this time in the calendar, maybe ever since they started doing the January camp. So stay tuned as Berhalter continues his first U.S. men's national team camp. We're going to take a break. It's Thursday Thoughts, which means you guys can open the floor up to wherever you want to take it. We can take your thoughts on the national team, on Atlanta United, on silly season, on Manchester City winning 9-0. Wherever you want to go, we'll get into it. We also have Felipe Cardenas joining us in about 15 minutes from The Athletic. We'll talk to him about his recent piece about potentially roles changing for Darlington Nagbe, Eric Remedi, and just catch up with Felipe on all of the latest in the silly season saga. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
The average time a resume spends on an HR manager's desk is 7 seconds, and most of them are tossed aside. Now imagine if one of those resumes belonged to Yasmin, who was
living in a shelter, juggling 3 jobs. I had to be resilient. That's something that you can't teach.
We rely so much on a resume, yet it could never tell the full story of someone who
had to be independent and take initiative. And that's how I handle every project I get.
Discover new ways to develop great talent at gradsoflife.org. Brought to you by Grads of Life and the Ad Council.
We know that every driver is different, and a one-size policy does not fit all. That's why Country Financial offers a variety of discounts, so you get the coverage you need and the savings you deserve. From good driver to good student, multi-policy to multi-car, we've got a discount to suit every driver. Call Jason Wright at 678-568-6871 today to see what you could save. On Facebook at Jason Wright Agency or by phone at 678-568-6871. Discounts vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Country Preferred Insurance Company, or Country Casualty Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
Hey, hon, what you doing with your phone? Taking pictures?
No, I'm asking it questions.
Like what?
Hey, Bobo, do flowers have best friends?
I'm sorry. I'm afraid I don't know that.
Hey, follow me. I want to show you something. Look, flowers do have best friends.
Whoa.
Some answers can only be found in nature. Discover the unsearchable. Visit discovertheforest.org to find a trail near you. Brought to you by the United States Forest Service and the Ad Council.
Soccer Down Here is sponsored by Apolinski & Associates, LLC, personal injury lawyers with over 30 years of experience. Call Steve Apolinski at 518-350-4231 or email him at steve@aa-legal.com if you need help with a wrongful death or serious injury matter. Steve Apolinski is rated one of the top 100 trial attorneys in Georgia, recognized as Legal Elite by Georgia Trend magazine for being one of the most effective lawyers in Georgia.
Welcome back. Soccer Down Here, January 10th edition. A sunny but cold Atlanta, Georgia. Let's get into silly season. We have some new reports out of England about Miguel Almiron and Newcastle United and all of the saga. Looks like, according to the Daily Mail, the transfer fee is around £8 million, $10 million apart. Between Atlanta United and Newcastle. The reports are starting to hit media in Newcastle, and the Chronicle, the newspaper in Newcastle, had an article really echoing a lot of what we were talking about yesterday when it came down to those desperation points for Newcastle United. And they were able to go into far more detail because of Newcastle's situation. It's really starting to come down to a spot where if this deal doesn't get done for Newcastle, and you have to start looking at, okay, well, we've got a few weeks. What are we going to do? Because we have to upgrade. We have to find some players. Are we going to go get loans from teams on the continent? What are we going to be able to do? You're running some big risks. And the first one, beyond how you finish the season, even if you stay up, the first big risk is that Rafa Benitez says adios in the summer. Because by all accounts, John, this was what he wanted from day one going into this transfer window, from day minus 60 probably, this was who he wanted, Miguel Almiron, to change this team. Reports out of the Chronicle, reports out of other sources in England have said that they've had scouts over here to see him play multiple times. This is not a new development that they were interested. MLS Cup was December 8th. If Rafa doesn't get his guy again, and this is transfer window after transfer window after transfer window, where he has not been able to upgrade the squad, even if they stay up, do you think Rafa leaves?
Yes.
I do too.
And for me, when he first showed up and he was part of the relegation fight where they eventually ended up in the championship, he stayed because of the fans and the promise of investment and the idea of immediately yo-yoing back from the championship and getting back in the Premier League. Rafa Benitez, with what he has been able to do, with what he hasn't been given by Mike Ashley, has done some yeoman's work just to keep them afloat in the Premier League. And you just have to wonder when enough is enough. And I think that this would be that. If he doesn't get who he wants, even though it has been written that he's making contingency plans and looking for loans and things like that, you get to that point where you just sit there and go, peace out. And I think that just a level of frustration, regardless of result, if you stay up, because there are teams that I think are worse than you that are currently in the Premier League. I think that Rafa's done one way or the other.
And when he came into Newcastle, he was there the last time they were relegated, and he stayed and brought them back up because they kept their spending close to Premier League levels in that year. They basically gambled in a huge way on going straight back up. Now, there's reports in some of these articles talking about, well, what are the what ifs if you don't get this deal done? There's reports that they lost 90 million pounds that year that they played in the championship. That's not even talking about value of the club during a potential sale, and this sale with Peter Kenyon and whatever consortium that he's working on, it's not going to get done before the transfer window's over. So just the paperwork and the legalities of it, it's not happening now. Now, could it get to a point where, okay, they're going to have a say or their influence is in this deal? Maybe, but probably not. So, Jarrett, I mean, you're at a point here where Newcastle's been relegated twice in the last decade, but bounced right back up. That's risky, and you've taken a hit both times that happened. You took a financial hit both times. If you go down and don't come back up for a third time, if you go down and if it's a $90 million hit and maybe you look at it and you're like, look, we're not going to spend as much money. We're going to risk it and try to spend less in the championship and still get back up immediately. If you don't, I mean, Newcastle could be what Leeds United turned into or what Portsmouth turned into or so many other clubs that dropped and never came back in the same way. I think they have to get a deal done here.
They have to, and even if it's not for Miguel Almiron, they need to get something done. I mean, if there's like a contingency plan of we have a fallback and it's this guy. And by all
accounts, there's not one of those. If
there's like a guy who's 5 or 10 million less than Miguel.
Yeah, there's not. There, by all accounts, now that doesn't mean it's not there. But there's not another guy that they're linked with like that. It sounds like, and John, correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like if this doesn't happen, you're looking at a loan for somebody from the continent that is a big step down. You're looking at a true, oh crap, we've got to go find something, let's go do it. There's not another transfer like lesser than Miguel Almiron that they would turn to. It would just be no big transfer, we're going to bring somebody in on loan.
Yep, that's the philosophy. And
it's all or nothing here.
Yeah, it is. It is. Everything has been pushed to the center of the table and trying to get something done on Almiron for Rafa.
So we're about to go to break, and we'll get Felipe Cardenas' thoughts on this too. I'm sure he has heard the interview with Miguel's agent from Paraguay. The pressure doesn't even have to, Atlanta United doesn't have to put a ton of pressure here on Newcastle. I mean, they're going to have to make a decision quickly because they're running out of time. But the pressure's there, Jarrett. I mean, this is not something that's manufactured. This is not something that, this is a player you'd like to have, and if you don't get him, okay, we'll worry about that in the summer. This is potentially a 9-figure kind of risk that you're talking about in terms of potential losses, and you're going back and forth over about $10 million.
Yeah, this is, like you said, this can get sideways. And if it does, I mean, it's weird that, the transfer of an MLS player could to a European club could be the the last thread holding the sword of Damocles over their head. That's a wild time to be alive.
Yeah, and I mean, it's still risky. Miguel Almiron hasn't played in England. He's the highest league he's played in, depending on who you talk to. It's either Argentina or Major League Soccer. That is a jump in quality. Is he going to be able to step straight in and change Newcastle's fortunes? There's risk there, but I think the bigger risk is not doing anything. And we'll have
They
to see.
need somebody to score goals. Anybody.
And finding somebody on loan in a couple of weeks is likely not going to be that guy. You're really betting on a true wild card situation if you don't get this deal done. So Newcastle's in a really tough spot. So as you're worried about this from an Atlanta United perspective or from an MLS perspective, keep that part in mind because that will affect Newcastle's role in it. And there are other clubs, both according to media and according to Miguel Almiron's agent, that are interested and are hanging around. So Newcastle, it sounds like it's the furthest along in the process, and they got a tough decision in front of them. It's not one that I would want to have to make at this point. Let's take a break. Let's get Felipe Cardenas on the line. We'll talk to him about Miguel Almiron. We'll talk to him about all kinds of other stuff. Hang out with us. We'll be right back.
Sweet strawberry icing. You're in Goodwill, and just past that vintage denim jacket you spot miniature donut earrings. You lean in. That's the scent of shopping success. Because at Goodwill, every item you buy funds local job training and more. So bring home those donut earrings and bring home so much good to your community. Goodwill. Bring good home. Brought to you by Goodwill and the Ad Council.
Soccer Down Here is sponsored by Appolinsky & Associates, LLC, personal injury lawyers with over 30 years of experience. Call Steve Appolinsky at 518-350-4231 or email him at steve@aa-legal.com if you need help with a wrongful death or serious injury matter. Steve Appolinsky is rated one of the top 100 trial attorneys in Georgia, recognized as legal elite by Georgia Trend magazine for being one of the most effective lawyers in Georgia.
Hamilton was adopted from a rescue in 2008. He really likes to be around people. I get out my mat and I'm doing a downward dog and he's underneath.
He's quite the pug about town. He gets invited to a lot of parties.
He knows he's a pretty big deal. Look at this little face. How could you not love him?
Hamilton the Pug, Instagram star and shelter pet. Amazing adoption stories start in shelters. Visit theshelterpetproject.org to find a pet near you. Brought to you by Maddie's Fund, the Humane Society of the United States, and the Ad Council.
As a business owner, you know that every year brings new challenges and opportunities. The success of your business demands expertise and focus. And Country Financial can help you keep that focus by helping ensure you have the right insurance protection in place to meet your goals. Jason Wright can help you create a customized insurance plan that has coverages designed just for your business. Give Jason a call at 678-568-6871 or reach him on Facebook at Jason Wright Agency. Coverages vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
welcome back. Soccer Down Here, January 10th edition. Thursday thoughts, if you have them, share them with us on Twitter at Soccer Down Here. We found somebody who's got a few thoughts about a few things. Felipe Cardenas of The Athletic. What's up, Felipe?
Hey, what's up, guys? Good morning.
Good morning. Let's get into, we're talking Miguel Almiron, we're talking about Newcastle's situation, but I thought it was very interesting timing and very calculated statements made by Miguel's agent yesterday on Paraguayan radio. What did you take out of that interview?
Well, yeah, I saw what Daniel Campos had to say, and I mean, to make my thought as brief as possible, I think he's an agent that's looking out for his client, and this is the time where the negotiation starts to potentially hit a wall, and so you start to kind of filter tidbits out to the media that favor your situation. And I think that's what he's done by saying that there are other teams interested. He's putting pressure on Newcastle at this point to get something done. Interestingly enough, it looks like Atlanta United is also there, kind of sitting comfortably in their chair, saying, this is our number, and we want to hit that number. So Daniel Campos hadn't said much since November, and all of a sudden January, and obviously the window is open, and this is the time to get out there and start influencing the negotiation in your favor. The same day or days, just days subsequently after the report came out of England that Newcastle felt that Miguel's personal terms were astonishingly high. So as far as his salary would go, so I think this is just part of the process, and I didn't see anything that was a red flag or a comment that could have been taken out of context.
Because, Felipe, I guess for lack of a better phrase, we talk about the anticipation of the extremes. And when you're in a transfer window, the two examples that we've brought up have been Newcastle, with Rafa Benitez trying to keep a Premier League side up, and a Real Betis who is trying to push toward a Champions League spot because of the street fight that La Liga is in right now. And for a player from Atlanta United to be in the discussion for going to the Premier League to help a team stay up, to go to La Liga to keep to push a team over the top, it's a really profound time and a profound statement, I think, about where Atlanta United has gone in a very short period of time when it comes to development and being the brand that they wanted to be.
Absolutely, and I think it always was going to start with Miguel Almiron. When he came in, when they signed him in 2017, they really hyped him as the club's first number 10. But at the same time, he was unknown. He really was unknown to a lot of people in North America. And like I've mentioned on this show before, at the time he still wasn't featured for Paraguay either. He wasn't, the starting playmaker for them. They had both Romero brothers that were ahead of him, and he was just starting to really break into the national team. But we all knew, once we saw him play and the league saw him play, that he was going to be the guy that proved Atlanta United's business model of buying young players and selling them off to Europe. And so it's going to begin and end really with Miguel Almiron. As soon as this deal goes through and he's moved on to Europe for a big fee, the ball starts rolling officially in this league and for this team that, they said that they were going to buy players, or they said they were going to sell them off. And then that door opens for other players, in South America, seeing the potential of going to MLS and getting better. And then moving on to Europe, they can still, maintain their ambitions of playing, in the top leagues in the world. To your point about Real Betis and the English Premier League, I think, two very different situations for Miguel. I think if he lands at Newcastle, the expectations will be enormous. He would be considered, right away the player that's going to keep them up, that's going to add extreme value to the squad. He'll be expected to be a difference maker right away. And the spotlight and the microscope will officially be on him from, he's not coming from Brazil. He's not a Brazilian. He's not an Argentine. He's Paraguayan. And unfortunately that comes with some sort of, stigma. Can they handle it? There hasn't been a lot of, big time Paraguayan forwards and playmakers that have excelled in England or even in Europe. That's just how it is. But in my personal opinion, I think he would do great in England. Now, if he goes to Real Betis, which I also believe would be a great spot for him, I think that the expectations change a little bit. Now he's part of a team that's like you said, they're fighting for a top 5, top 4 finish. And that would be excellent for them. And he would he would be a star player. He would be a playmaker. He would be a difference maker. But I just think that in a league like La Liga, where the stars shine really bright, and we know who those stars are, the expectations would be tempered slightly less than they would be if he plays in England.
And speaking of guys who might be tied to England and tied to hopes of a national team, Leandro Gonzalez-Pirez has been talked about a lot this year, and has been vocal in the past about possibly wanting to go if it means a chance for Argentina's national team. I mean, without causing a town outcry about a player leaving, I mean, how likely do you think that could be that Atlanta might have to move on from him?
Yeah, I think it's likely. I think for fans, from a fan's perspective, you say, unfortunately, it's likely. But from, if you just remember what this club wants to do and the expectations and the ambitions for the players that come here, not every single player that comes from South America sees Atlanta United as the place where they're going to spend the rest of their careers. Like, they still have hopes of, playing in Europe. Or playing for their national team. And a player like LGP, I think that hope of getting to Europe is now actually much stronger after winning a championship. It's kind of like, okay, I checked that box. I have proven that I'm one of the top defenders in this league. I think that's something that you could go across the league and ask opponents, coaches, and just media, and I think everyone would agree with that. So, all of a sudden he's looking at himself like, why not me? Like, he played in Europe. He had a short stint in Belgium, and he obviously has quality, and it's for him. He sees it as, that window for the national team is slightly open, and it can close so quickly. For a country like Argentina, where they can. And just getting into a camp is so difficult. And so I think despite what he told me in October about wanting to change the perception in Argentina that if you're playing in MLS, you don't deserve a shot at the national team. I think he really does believe that. And I think a player like Pity Martinez, who people in Argentina think is a step, more than a few steps above every single top talent in Argentina, despite that, I think he's still maybe thinking, and maybe his agent, maybe there's whispers in his ear like, hey man, if you really want to get to the national team, if you want a spot, you're going to have to get to Europe. That might be something that he's hearing, and I think he's going to consider it.
Let's get into the article you wrote over at The Athletic, Felipe, about how Eric Remedi and Darlington Nagbe's maybe roles, responsibilities could change a little bit with Frank de Boer, and just the way that Frank has his central midfielders play as opposed to what we've seen so far from Nagbe and Remedi under Tata Martino.
Yeah, I mean, like I said in the article, I did some research. I went back and watched some Ajax games and really spent some time just looking at how a 4-3-3. How a central midfielder works, and what his role is under De Boer in a 4-3-3, in De Boer's 4-3-3. So let's be clear there. Based on what I read and what I watched, like, his 4-3-3 isn't the classic Dutch 4-3-3. It is really possession based, and so like a total football purist, a Dutch total football purist, kind of frowns upon the notion that you're running a 4-3-3, which is expected to, the 4-3-3 pushes a team forward at all times, and while De Boer's teams did that, the priority was on possession. And his central midfielders, though, they weren't just there to possess. That's why he likes technical midfielders throughout the field that can keep the ball, can control the ball, can distribute and play under pressure. But his central midfielders really did have that responsibility of playmaking and defending. So they were both kind of like eights at the they were number eights. They were box to box. And I think, Darlington and Remedi have that profile. They can both do that. They can both get up and down the field. Like I wrote about in this piece about Remedi, I think we were all sold on, him being this pit bull in the middle that's just going to recover and distribute. And that's just not him. He's a very good player on the ball. His skill is polished. His technique is very strong. And yes, he can mark, but he can also get forward and he can distribute and he can, find the forward, find the playmakers and make that, line breaking pass. And, Darlington, I think we already know who he is. I think, if you look at young Darlington, that's who he was. He was a little bit more of a risk taker because that's what he was being asked to do in Portland. In Atlanta, he was much more of a composed midfielder that was asked to control tempo and let the playmakers around him do the work. Now, I think it's easy to argue that Atlanta United will still have playmakers around the field. They'll have Pity Martinez and Barco that can get on the ball and play in a 10 spot. But I really think that if we end up seeing an Atlanta United team that's in a 4-3-3 with that midfield partnership, without a Miguel Almiron that can just break lines and be spontaneous, the central midfielders are going to have to be more creative. And, we've seen that when Miguel was out, the team was very, much more methodical. Sometimes they didn't have ideas, in the attack. They were very predictable. So, those two central midfielders that are very technical and creative, in Darlington Nagbe and Eric Remedi, I think they'll be asked to provide a little bit more, ideas in the attack. And like I said in the piece, like they're more than capable. And I would expect a guy like Remedi to get forward a little bit. Now he can, in a 4-3-3, he can dip back as well and play, and kind of play right ahead of the center backs as well. But if that's a formation that we see, I would expect them to have a little bit more creative responsibilities.
Yeah, there's a lot of multifaceted players mixed into this group for sure. I think Frank de Boer will have a lot of options. It's way too early to get into tactics because I think de Boer's shown enough that they'll be pretty similar to Tata Martino and that they will change from time to time. Speaking of Tata, what I wanted to finish up with you about, Felipe, was what did you make of the reaction to Tata Martino in Mexico now that it's official, now that he's been introduced? It seemed like kind of a split reaction from Mexican fans as to whether they're excited and think he'll do well or whether they think he'll be worse than Osorio.
Yeah, I agree. And I thought it was, I actually expected more backlash, during, the day that he was introduced and really just like till the end of the week. But to your point, I agree. I think it depends on what you read and where you were on Twitter. The Twitter trolls are always there. They're always, they want the hot take. I saw, tweets from Mexican fans like, that Tata is a terrible coach. He never won anything. And, I think what's most interesting for us, for all of us here in Atlanta, and especially those that cover the team and have covered, Tata Martino for the last two seasons or this season alone, for me, it's interesting now to see the stories just popping up again about him not winning in Argentina, him not winning in Barcelona. He's never won anything. And it's all coming back. And it's like, I feel like that the Mexican press, the journalists and the fans have to go through that process, just like we did. Who is Tata Martino? Like where should we look based on his past to to find the nugget that will tell us how his next team is going to play. So when he was here in Atlanta, we all did that. We went back to Newell's, we went back to Argentina. We studied his loan season in Barcelona, and so that's happening now. And to mixed reactions, to your point. Some of them, some fans and some pundits think that this is the best hire that Mexico could have possibly made, based on the talent that they have, the youth development that has been a priority for them for the last few years, since the last Olympics and probably the last two Olympics. And under 20 World Cups where they've performed very well. So, I think the pieces are there for Tata. And, the fact that he's dealing with what everyone believes to be, like I've said here before, just like the dumpster fire as far as the media goes, I think he's going to be able to handle that really well. And, I'm looking now at reports of Carlos Queiroz being potentially named the next manager for Colombia after he finishes up with Iran in the Asian Cup, and the Colombian media is not friendly either, and it really takes a distinct personality, a savvy personality, to be able to handle the questions and the criticism that is a constant. And I think managers like Queiroz, managers like Tata Martino, that have that outgoing personality and really the smart charisma, they're going to be fine. I think Tata is going to be fine. I think he's going to make that team very good. When it'll happen, I don't know. I don't think it's a magic pill that all of a sudden Mexico becomes world beaters. But they're going to be solid, and I think they'll start to play the way he wants them to play, fairly quickly.
It's going to be a fun ride watching this, and we're going to get to see it up close and personal with Mexico and the United States facing off this summer at the Gold Cup, hopefully, and then CONCACAF Nations League and all this different stuff. You're going to have a lot of comparisons over the next 4 years if Greg Berhalter and Tata Martino both see out their full term. Felipe, we'll be talking about that and more with you next week. Maybe we'll have some silly season resolution, or maybe it'll get sillier. I don't know. But thanks for the time. We appreciate it.
All right, guys. Take care.
We're going to take a quick break, come back and wrap up hour number 1 after this.
The average time a resume spends on an HR manager's desk is 7 seconds, and most of them are tossed aside. Now imagine if one of those resumes belonged to Yasmin, who was
living in a shelter, juggling 3 jobs. I had to be resilient. That's something that you can't teach.
We rely so much on a resume, yet it could never tell the full story of someone who
had to be independent and take initiative. And that's how I handle every project I get.
Discover new ways to develop great talent at gradsoflife.org. Brought to you by Grads of Life and the Ad Council.
We know that every driver is different, and a one-size policy does not fit all. That's why Country Financial offers a variety of discounts, so you get the coverage you need and the savings you deserve. From good driver to good student, multi-policy to multi-car, we've got a discount to suit every driver. Call Jason Wright at 678-568-6871 today to see what you could save. On Facebook at Jason Wright Agency, or by phone at 678-568-6871. Discounts vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Country Preferred Insurance Company, or Country Casualty Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
Hey, hon, what you doing with your phone? Taking pictures?
No, I'm asking it questions.
Like what?
Hey, Bobo, do flowers have best friends?
I'm sorry. I'm afraid I don't know that.
Hey, follow me. I want to show you something. Look, flowers do have best friends.
Whoa.
Some answers can only be found in nature. Discover the unsearchable. Visit discovertheforest.org to find a trail near you. Brought to you by the United States Forest Service and the Ad Council.
Soccer Down Here is sponsored by Apolinski and Associates, LLC, personal injury lawyers with over 30 years of experience. Call Steve Apolinski at 518-350-4231 or email him at steve@aa-legal.com if you need help with a wrongful death or serious injury matter. Steve Apolinski is rated one of the top 100 trial attorneys in Georgia, recognized as legal elite by Georgia Trend magazine for being one of the most effective lawyers in Georgia.
Welcome back. Soccer Down Here, Thursday Thoughts edition of the show. Almost done with hour number 1 for January 10th. One other thing that happened yesterday that we haven't had a chance to talk about yet, Atlanta United signed a goalkeeper, Brendan Moore, signed to a first-team deal. He's originally from Roswell, played 10 matches this season with Rockdale in England's League One, but his contract was up, I believe, at the end of the calendar year, and he has moved on a free to Atlanta United. So he's coming home. Played at University of North Carolina as well. Were you guys surprised? Let's start with you, Jarrett. Were you surprised to see a third goalkeeper signed to the first-team roster?
I mean, yeah, kind of, but it could be the situation where you were in last year where you keep 3 goalkeepers on the roster and you send one down to USL sometimes to get some work. Count for potentially national team with Brad Guzan. I mean, I think we need to discuss Brad Guzan's going to be, he should, by all accounts, be in the conversation for the Gold Cup.
He should is the key phrase there.
Should is the key, yeah. Whether he is or isn't remains to be seen, but he should be in that conversation for the Gold Cup. So, I mean, if you lose Brad Guzan for that, I mean, it would be nice to have somebody else in the fold who is comfortable and fits what you want without scrambling.
Yeah, and John, I mean, I think this was basically the intention last year with Mitch Hildebrandt signing. The injury for Hildebrandt kind of made it a little more difficult, and he didn't see as much time with the second team as we expected going in.
Right.
Now, you do have Paul Christensen as well on a second-team deal, and his option was picked up. So are you expecting to see a lot of Alec Can as the number 2 at the first team and Brendan Moore with Atlanta United 2 getting significant minutes there?
Yeah, that's what I'm looking at with Can and then Brendan Moore. And the way that I look at it is pretty much how the two of you have already broken it down, is that because this is a Gold Cup year, because you don't know what Brad Guzan would be up to when it comes to national team, I take as many options as humanly possible and make sure that you've got them, because bottom line is you never know. You could have injuries. You've got national team. There's a lot of stuff in play. And in a season like this where there's a lot of stuff going on, possibly, then have all your bases covered.
Yeah, possibly, again, being the key. I'll be fascinated to see what Greg Berhalter does at goalkeeper, because Zach Steffen is a guy he knows very well from the club time at Columbus. You have a number of other goalkeepers that'll be pushing for time here. Will Brad Guzan get those opportunities? I think he should. We'll see if Greg Berhalter feels the same way. Let's take a break, come back, reset for hour number 2. You guys have Thursday thoughts. We're going to talk about them to open up the 10 o'clock hour. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Sweet strawberry icing. You're in Goodwill, and just past that vintage denim jacket you spot miniature donut earrings. You lean in. Ah, that's the scent of shopping success. Because at Goodwill, every item you buy funds local job training and more. So bring home those donut earrings and bring home so much good to your community. Goodwill. Bring good home. Brought to you by Goodwill and the Ad Council.
Soccer Down Here is sponsored by Appolinsky & Associates, LLC, personal injury lawyers with over 30 years of experience. Call Steve Appolinsky at 518-350-4231 or email him at steve@aa-legal.com if you need help with a wrongful death or serious injury matter. Steve Appolinsky is rated one of the top 100 trial attorneys in Georgia, recognized as legal elite by Georgia Trend magazine for being one of the most effective lawyers in Georgia.
Hamilton was adopted from a rescue in 2008. He really likes to be around people. I get out my mat and I'm doing a downward dog and he's underneath.
He's quite the pug about town. He gets invited to a lot of parties.
He knows he's a pretty big deal. Look at this little face. How could you not love him?
Hamilton the Pug, Instagram star and shelter pet. Amazing adoption stories start in shelters. Visit theshelterpetproject.org to find a pet near you. Brought to you by Maddie's Fund, the Humane Society of the United States, and the Ad Council.
As a business owner, you know that every year brings new challenges and opportunities. The success of your business demands expertise and focus. And Country Financial can help you keep that focus by helping ensure you have the right insurance protection in place to meet your goals. Jason Wright can help you create a customized insurance plan that has coverages designed just for your business. Give Jason a call at 678-568-6871 or reach him on Facebook at Jason Wright Agency. Coverages vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
You're listening to Soccer Down Here daily on SDH Networks, a division of OSG Sports. Find us at Soccer Down Here on Facebook and Twitter. The time is now the top of the hour. Peep, y'all.
Welcome back. Hour number 2 of Soccer Down here for January 10th, Thursday Thoughts. Lots of stuff to get into on the Twitters. If you want to get into the conversation, tweet at us at Soccer Down here. Thanks to Coach Pibb, Mr. Peas, on Twitter for sharing this with us. More breakdown on the schedule and how slightly wacky it is for Atlanta United compared to other teams. Looking at how many times Atlanta United is playing on 3 or 4 days rest. Atlanta leads the league with 14 times. Seattle's next with 13. Then you have Minnesota and D.C. with 12. Quite a few with 11, and it's probably about half that have less than 10. So more times that you're playing on short rest than anybody else. Minimum number of days to play 5 through 8 games. Atlanta and Houston have situations where they play 8 games in less than 30 days. Nobody else has that. That's crazy. That's crazy.
Gee, thanks.
8 games in 27 days. That's what Atlanta United has to face at one point this season. And Houston has to do it in 28. You look at a couple others that, like FC Dallas does 8 games in 42 days. That's the minimum that they have to face. It happens, I guess, but yeah.
Great.
The travel distances, Atlanta's right there among the top, but we kind of knew that would happen with just the way the schedule falls out. So it's difficult. It's a difficult schedule, and you've got more short rest than anybody else. That's the part I'm not a big fan of, and I really don't like the thing we've talked about with 4 times where you're playing on short rest after a midweek and your opponent is not playing on short rest. That's an issue. That's something that I'm not a big fan of. Josh Eisenberg asked, he said, seeing additions to the coaching staff for Atlanta United, do we know who all is going with Tata Martino, going somewhere else, or staying? Any word on Dario Sala? Yeah, that stuff's been discussed out there. It hasn't been, I don't think it's been a release from Atlanta United yet about coaching staff members who have left, and that I would assume would all get nailed down in Monday's media availability press conference, all of that. Dario Sala is in Chile. He took an assistant job there. I know Jorge Thieler, and I want to say at least 2 more guys from Tata's back office staff are with him in Mexico, and I don't know what the final number was there. So Aaron Hyde, goalkeeper coach, is staying. He will be part of Frank de Boer's staff from all accounts, and we'll get more clarification at the press conference on Monday at 11 a.m. that will officially introduce Frank de Boer to Atlanta. I've seen a lot of back and forth about why hasn't he had a press conference, why hasn't he been presented to the media. I mean, I think more than anything, John, it's just he hasn't been here. You had to get a visa and all of that stuff sorted out, and this was mentioned in the media availability after the announcement that was one slightly unknown just as to when all that would go down and when he would be able to travel. When he was able to travel, he went straight to the Combine in Orlando. So he hasn't been in Atlanta for any period of time since he was hired. Monday will be the day that kicks off training camp, and he will have a chance to talk to the media. I know from the 92.9 side of things, we will be at the Children's Healthcare of Atlanta training ground all day from 6 a.m. until 7 p.m. with the morning show, John and Hugh, the midday show with Rick and John, and the afternoon show with Dukes and Bell, all on site, all having guests throughout the day. Mike Conti and I will be there as well. We'll be doing some digital stuff. We'll be on air. It's going to be a big day to kick off the 2019 season officially. Frank de Boer will be on with Dukes and Bell. Mike and I will catch up with him for an interview. Darren Eales, Carlos Bocanegra will be available. Hopefully more special guests. It's going to be a fun day to kind of officially kick off 2019, even though it feels like 2018 just ended.
And obviously, with everything happening mid to late morning, at least when it comes to media availability, when we know what our broadcast plans are, we'll let you know. Things are probably going to have to be shifted and slid, but when we know what our shifting and sliding turns into, obviously, guys, will let you know.
We will likely be doing a combined soccer down here over there show in the dinner hour is the plan, roughly. But yeah, we don't know schedule as of yet, but Monday there will not be a morning show in its usual format. Maybe some drop-ins on Monday as we're able to do a couple things, or as I'm able to grab some stuff in Marietta. But an official SDH show will probably be a combined soccer down here over there late afternoon, early evening show on Monday. So stay tuned to that. It'll be good to just get a chance to, I mean, for one, just to meet Frank, but also to hear from Frank for the first time in an official Atlanta United capacity on Monday. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, and this is the beginning of the new era, and obviously there's a lot of expectations. You got to hit the ground running because competition is just around the corner. And we saw what Doug Robertson of the AJC posted yesterday that tickets for the match at Herediano, it's 10 days before, will be available for folks who want to make the trip, and so we'll keep an eye on that as well. And I'm looking forward to seeing how many folks are going to be making said trip down to Costa Rica for this.
Yeah. A lot of people are talking about it and trying to figure out logistics. So that's going to be a fun one for sure. I can't wait to see how many of the 17s are able to get down to Costa Rica and Herediano for that one.
How? The sentence that you just said, how wild is that?
Not even anymore. I'm past. I'm almost past. There's still some things that surprise me that I'm like, wow, this is what we're talking about. But that to me is kind of a given that Atlanta United fans will be there at a match involving Atlanta United. It doesn't even surprise me anymore.
No.
It's just that's what 2019 is going to be. It's going to be a wild, crazy year. I made a statement yesterday as we were trying to figure out a comparison for the Atlanta-Orlando rivalry, and I knew somebody would get riled up about it, and Thomas Jewin did not disappoint with a gif of Georgia Tech beating Georgia in Athens because I compared Orlando to Georgia Tech. Knew it was coming. I will take the L. It's fine. But Georgia doesn't take many of those L's, Thomas. I hope you know that. Anyway, let's move on. More stuff about the upcoming week, the SuperDraft. What did you think, John, of Philadelphia's decision to punt on the SuperDraft, trade all their draft picks to Cincinnati for $150,000 in general allocation money that could turn into $200,000 if, I guess, said draft picks turn into anything? They just said, no, we don't want any of these picks. Go here, take them.
Well, I mean, considering what the Union have for an academy, and I figured that Ernst Tanner kind of looked at everything, and he's just like, nah, I'm good, and found a partner in Cincinnati who needs to fill out roster spots. And if you got a dance partner like that, if you can get some six figures to the left of the decimal point for it, I completely see where he's going with it. And if he's confident in his academy and in his own scouting system and bringing in players that he wants to bring, and Cincinnati needs the help, hey, it kind of reminded me slightly of when Mike Ditka traded all of the draft picks when he was the head coach in New Orleans just so he could get Ricky Williams. But there isn't that one player that's involved this time. But no, I completely understand it. I understand that. Okay, so you don't see anybody there. You're confident in your own guys. So I got stuff. Who wants stuff?
Yeah, there's not a Ricky Williams in this draft, I don't think.
No.
The lower picks are kind of thrown in here. It's honestly not that big of a deal. The number 13 pick, I mean, there's some value in that one, and that's probably the bulk of the $150,000 in GAM when you look at this, because that's a pick in a spot that has turned into something in the past last year at number 13, Eric Dick, goalkeeper for Sporting Kansas City, was the guy. He was signed by Sporting Kansas City. I don't think he featured in a regular season match. He didn't. He played 13 with Swope Park Rangers as on loan, their affiliate. So, yeah, you know, a backup goalkeeper is what you got out of that. 150,000. Yeah, I mean, Atlanta picked John Gallagher 1 pick later. We think he's going to be a guy who factors into the roster this year. Chicago took Mo Adams at 10, a few picks ahead. I think that was a good pick. Brian White for the Red Bulls was at 16, a guy who played some important minutes for them. It's a pick that could be something. And let's flip it to the Cincinnati side, because everybody is freaked out about Philadelphia trading all their picks away and their statement about, look, we don't need them. Cincinnati now has 3 picks in the first round, along with a bunch of other picks. Good move for them. Does it really matter? Is it just adding some more pieces that could potentially factor in an expansion year? What do you think?
I mean, the Colonel basically said on Twitter just a second ago that that Cincinnati's dealing with it the way that he plays the lottery. The more chances you take, the better chance you have to win.
It's a good way of looking at it, especially with 3 first rounders.
Yeah, so I look at it. It's like, hey, you're trying to fill out roster spots, and you have 3 opportunities in the first round to get some folks who could pan out and be a positive for you. I'm all for it.
I mean, it works out for Cincinnati that you have 7 picks in the first 37 picks of the draft.
That's strong.
You're going to find some guys that are going to make your roster. And I think you're going to find some guys that are going to play minutes. I mean, you have the number 1 pick. That should be a player who contributes for you in year 1. If it isn't, you didn't do your homework and you didn't scout correctly, flat out. You have the number 1 pick. You should be getting somebody who fits what you're doing and plays in 2019. The other 6 picks out of the first 37, you should be getting some guys that make your roster for sure. So I get it. Orlando has went down the draft route as well with a lot of picks, but they've picked up a bunch of late picks. And I don't know if those are going to be worth anything. It feels kind of like a waste for some of their picks they've picked up. But Orlando has a number 3 pick. They also have the 3rd pick in the second round, number 27. They have 38 as well. We'll see. I think this draft and looking at some of the mock drafts that are out there and who is being predicted for what, it doesn't feel as impactful as previous drafts. You know, guys who were projected at number 1 are sliding. Others have moved up. Matt Doyle has Tajon Buchanan, a winger/forward, as his number 1 pick right now. He's a Generation Adidas player from Syracuse. A lot of potential. Didn't do a ton in college. And you wonder, okay, is he going to be able to make that jump even with the potential? Is he going to be able to produce? Does Cincinnati need to pick a player at number 1 that is going to produce? Or can they pick a potential guy? I kind of lean to Cincinnati might need to pick somebody who's ready to play now. And that's the better route here for them. I don't know if Buchanan is that guy, unless they've seen something in the week of the combine that they think, yeah, he fits what we need and he's going to play straight away. I think they have to get a contributor at number 1.
No, I agree because, I mean, how many guys have we seen that are a part of the FCC roster right now? Do we have a roundish number as to how many folks are on their roster?
I mean, they're probably in the 20-ish. They're not like that far from filling the whole thing.
But if you can pick up somebody at number 1 who can help you out immediately, if it's quality minutes coming off the bench, whatever you want to classify that as, I mean, I think that number 1 selection, you better have it pegged and you better have your guy figured out. Even though I know that you have all the selections in 3 and 37, kind of like Orlando
but
does.
Number 1 is critical because you've got 7 in the first 37 picks. Okay, one of them's going to be a goalkeeper somewhere along the way because you have 2 goalkeepers on your roster. You've got Titon coming over from Poland, and you have Spencer Ritchie. So you're going to get a third goalkeeper. Okay.
Yep.
So that's one of those guys, and that could be one of the second-round guys. You know, you look at the back, and you look at, I think, a position where you can find help out of the college draft is at outside back. You can find a guy who is athletic, or you can find a guy who is being converted to an outside back. A player that I liked a lot last year that I think had a good rookie campaign was Brandon Bye with New England, who played a good bit last season on either side in the back. Now, for Cincinnati, you have Garza, you have Alvis Powell, you have Blake Smith, who can play out wide. You have Justin Hoyt, older, more veteran player who can play out wide. Wouldn't be bad to pick up an outside back with some depth, maybe even a center back as well. Midfield, this is where I wonder if there is anybody in the draft who is going to help you. I think midfield is a tough spot to find somebody out of the college game. Maybe a defensive guy, maybe a more deep-lying 8 you might be able to find. Not a huge position of need because you have Alashe, you have Eric Alexander, you have Corbin Bone, you have Jimmy McLaughlin who can play those roles, Victor Ulloa who can play those roles. Maybe a depth piece, maybe a depth winger you can find. Up top, you know, you're talking about Fernando Adi, you're talking about Darren Maddox, you're talking about Emery Welshman. Maybe a true target forward if you find one. You know, big body up top. You can find one of those in those picks. And then, you know, we've went through if you go best player available who's going to contribute, number 1. You get a goalkeeper out of these 7. You get an outside back out of these 7. Go ahead and let's say you get a center back out of these 7. You get a central midfielder who's going to be a lot of energy, a lot of work rate. You get a winger and you get a forward. That's your 7 picks. If you can get all of those, maybe sacrifice 1 to double up to get that extra lottery ticket, as the Colonel put it. Not a bad route for Cincinnati. I think 7 picks in the first 37 is a worthwhile bit of moves for them to pull that off. And let's also remember what they did. They made the deal with LAFC earlier in the day. That got them one of those first-round picks. It also got them $175,000 in general allocation money. Now, part of that was so an LAFC player was not picked in the expansion draft. So this was a multifaceted agreement that Cincinnati and LAFC made. But then you took that allocation money that you received from LA and you shipped it over to Philadelphia, and you got another first-round pick and more bonus picks. Pretty good piece of business for Cincinnati. I think they did well.
Yeah, and as you were going through positions of need, obviously for me, I was thinking outside back, because of what Greg's injury history has been, and you just kind of have to have that in your back pocket somewhere. So
yeah, I just think it's a position of strength out of the college game more than anything. If you're looking at guys who translate from the college game to MLS, outside back is a safe bet. It's a safer risk than some of the other positions.
And the way that you broke it down, I know that there are folks who came up from the roster last year from USL who are going to be competing for spaces too. So I want to see how the roster shakes out. I'm looking forward to seeing how many survive from last year's roster with the run that they made and with the pieces that they've brought in to get ready for the draft section of all of this. I'm looking forward to seeing the jigsaw puzzle.
Yeah, it's going to be fun to watch all this play out for Cincinnati. We'll see as they pick their spots in the draft. We'll see what they get out of it, and then we'll see once they start training camp if these are going to be contributors. I think out of those 7, they need to hit on 4 guys who are on your final roster and not just at the bottom of it, not seeing the field or just getting loaned to USL. I think you need to get 4 guys who are going to play some minutes for you in 2019. I think you're going to need that if you're Cincinnati out of this draft. Let's take a break, come back, more Thursday thoughts after this.
The average time a resume spends on an HR manager's desk is 7 seconds, and most of them are tossed aside. Now imagine if one of those resumes belonged to Yasmin, who was
living in a shelter, juggling 3 jobs. I had to be resilient. That's something that you can't teach.
We rely so much on a resume, yet it could never tell the full story of someone who
had to be independent and take initiative. And that's how I handle every project I get.
Discover new ways to develop great talent at gradsoflife.org. Brought to you by Grads of Life and the Ad Council.
We know that every driver is different, and a one-size policy does not fit all. That's why Country Financial offers a variety of discounts, so you get the coverage you need and the savings you deserve. From good driver to good student, multi-policy to multi-car, we've got a discount to suit every driver. Call Jason Wright at 678-568-6871 today to see what you could save. On Facebook at Jason Wright Agency or by phone at 678-568-6871. Discounts vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Country Preferred Insurance Company, or Country Casualty Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
Hey, hon, what you doing with your phone? Taking pictures?
No, I'm asking it questions.
Like what?
Hey, Bobo, do flowers have best friends?
I'm sorry. I'm afraid I don't know that.
Hey, follow me. I want to show you something. Look, flowers do have best friends.
Whoa.
Some answers can only be found in nature. Discover the unsearchable. Visit discovertheforest.org to find a trail near you. Brought to you by the United States Forest Service and the Ad Council.
Soccer Down Here is sponsored by Appolinsky and Associates, LLC, personal injury lawyers with over 30 years of experience. Call Steve Appolinsky at 518-350-4231 or email him at steve@aa-legal.com if you need help with a wrongful death or serious injury matter. Steve Appolinsky is rated one of the top 100 trial attorneys in Georgia, recognized as legal elite by Georgia Trend magazine for being one of the most effective lawyers in Georgia.
Welcome back. Soccer Down Here, January 10th edition, Thursday Thoughts. Some thoughts on the SuperDraft. Drew Gano follows up and asks, looking at what the union did and with MLS rumored to be considering doing away with the combine, what would be the impact on the college player and college game if MLS did away with the draft? I don't think it'd have an impact on the college player and the college game, honestly, right now. There's benefits if they did away with the draft. College players would be able to go where they want to go to try to earn a contract instead of waiting to see who picked them and where they end up in preseason. They would be able to go wherever they wanted to try to go in preseason. It's an interesting spot because of the growth of the academy. You know, the college game is not as important in terms of developing professional players as it used to be, because it used to just be the only way. Now, with so many players going academy, going pro earlier, now you have players going overseas and skipping it altogether. What is the value of the draft? I think it still has a few more years because there are more Julian Gressels out there. There are Brandon Byes out there. There are Chris Muellers out there. There are players out there. What's interesting is that so many of those players now are starting to become international players because guys who don't get a pro deal overseas have an option to come here and get an education and also play in college, and they're in a different development position than American players who went through the academy process, didn't get a pro deal, go on to college. Because, you know, a guy like Julian Gressel was at a professional academy setup. So coming into a professional team wasn't really that much of a transition. It was different than his time at Providence, but it wasn't that different from what he had experienced before. He was a little more ready-made for it. Other guys, it's a shock to the system. I think the draft does go away eventually, but I don't know when that is. I don't know if it's 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. I don't know. But I think it will play less and less of a role in roster construction as we go. And that's probably really highlighted by Philadelphia's decision here.
So then let me ask you this. When you get to that day, whenever that day is, that the draft doesn't exist, is there a concern about bidding wars?
No. I mean, Who are you bidding over? Who are you warring over? You're warring over
teams going against each other looking for similar talent.
I mean, you're warring over paying a guy $100,000 or $200,000. Like there's a cap because of the quality of the player. Julian Gressel coming out of college wasn't. I mean, he went number 8. There were 7 guys picked ahead of him. There hasn't been a number 1 pick in the draft in quite a while that everybody has been, oh my gosh, we have to get this guy. So there's not going to be much of a bidding war. I mean, it's going to be a few $1,000s in a contract here or there or whichever way. And maybe you eliminate that by slotting in college players at a certain starting salary. Unless you're going to see... I mean, the only time we've seen guys come out and get bigger money is if they have a homegrown situation, like Jordan Morris, or you see Generation Adidas get guys who come out early and give them more security in development, which is a little bit different setup than what we're talking about. I don't think it's going to result in a bidding war. Now, that's something MLS wants to avoid. They don't want MLS clubs bidding against each other to raise up the price. And that's one reason I think you have a draft in the first place. But I think you're getting to a point that there's just not much of a quality of a player to war over. So I don't think it's going to... You're not going to see a starting salary for a guy get bid up to $500,000 or be a TAM guy. It's just not going to happen. The quality's not there.
And that was kind of what I was trying to figure out, is if the quality of the player who would be the number 1 or the number 2 would create those kind of situations where you would end up with bidding wars. That's what I was trying to figure out.
There hasn't been one. I mean, you're probably going back to Christian Roldan, who slid in the draft for some unknown reason, and now he's been signed after proving himself to a TAM deal. I mean, out of last year's draft, there's nobody anywhere close to that kind of contract. Joao Moutinho was traded. Tomas Hilliard-Arce barely played. Tristan Blackman barely played. Francis Atuahene barely played. John Baquero was traded. Chris Mueller, good player. Mason Toye played a fair bit. Brandon Bai played a good bit. Mark Segbers went out on loan a bunch. Mo Adams fell out of favor somehow. That's your top 10. There's nobody in that group that's near a TAM deal, in my opinion. Nobody close. Go back a year, and you have Julian Gressel at 8. But ahead of him, Abu Dunladi, not a definite starter right now. Miles Robinson, not a definite starter right now. He was picked to develop. Jonathan Lewis, a lot of potential. Called into the national team, not playing regularly for NYC. Jeremy Abobasi, locked down a starting job midway through his second year. Lalas Abubakar has been a off-and-on starter for Columbus. Jackson Ewell hasn't played consistently for San Jose. Jake Nerwinski, good pickup for Vancouver. Julian Gressel, great pickup for Atlanta. Nico Hansen, good pickup for Columbus. Joe Holland, I believe, is in USL now. He was the number 10 pick from Houston. That's your top 10 from 2 years ago. I mean, this is the level, the quality level is not going to increase in college. And these are your last 2 drafts looking at the top 10. So I don't see it changing dramatically. Jack Harrison is one of your biggest guys to come out of the draft in a long time. And he's a unique situation. You know, a kid who grew up in Manchester United's academy, didn't get signed, came over to Wake Forest, signed with Generation Adidas early, and now has moved to England. Very unique set of circumstances. I mean, other guys in that 2016 draft, Keegan Rosenberry was just traded. Brandon Vincent just retired. Fabian Herbers has moved around a good bit. Richie Larea has moved around a good bit. Andrew Tarbell has played a good number of minutes with San Jose. That's it. It's just not there. So I think if you do away with the draft, eventually, I don't think it happens before 5 years, and you let players then say, okay, I'm a right back. Where can I go and have a legitimate chance at making a roster? I'm going to try to get it into camp here or here. Maybe that's a better situation. Not sure. I think that's something the Players Association and the league are going to have to start talking about when it comes to collective bargaining for sure. I want to get your thoughts, John, on this. Yesterday came out that Mark Geiger is retiring from refereeing. We knew this day was coming. I think it caught a lot of people by surprise. But I think there's a mandatory retirement age for guys anyway. And Geiger was getting closer. He wasn't there yet. But he's retired as an active referee. He's been appointed as the director of senior match officials for Pro, and he'll oversee the work of officials operating at the MLS level starting for the 2019 season. How do you remember Mark Geiger as a referee? What's his legacy going to be?
Well, I mean, if you take the frustration of fandom out of it, if you look at his pedigree and all of the matches of high regard that he called, then there's obviously something there from what he was able to do and from his history. I think that you have to put him on the Mount Rushmore of officials. I really do. And I was looking at the numbers because I read the article once it was announced, and just the sheer number of high-profile events that he called meant that a lot of folks thought that he should have been in those places. And I think that now that he's going to be a part of Pro, I'm hoping that a lot of officials who are up and coming will listen to what he has to say. And when it comes to managing games and things like that, and how to be like Geiger-esque, but not taking it in the negative connotation that I know that some fans will, but to have more individuals who can have that kind of a pedigree. I'm liking the next step, and I'm liking the anticipation to have folks learn from him so we can have more individuals like that down the line when it comes to officials, if that makes any sense.
Yes, I like that. I agree with you. I agree with our friend Jill Robbins, who said, I may be in the minority, but I was happy to see this because of what it portends for the future of officiating. I think in that regard, it's a great thing because now you're getting a guy who has done more at the international level as an American referee than I believe anybody. If not, he's in the top three. Brian Hall, Essie Baharmist are both there from the last 20, 30 years. But in this current wave, as a center referee, he's the guy. I think Corey Rockwell is the guy from an AR perspective. It's great to have him still involved. And I think that's the most important thing here. Whether you liked him on the field or not, and I grew to like him, I think he maybe had, after his experience with VAR here in Atlanta, where we were not big fans of his performances. World Cup, I thought he did a good job, and his work in the postseason, and as GTUTD1 on Twitter said, his last Atlanta United game called on the field was solid. I think he will be very important for the next generation of referees. And that's where his legacy, which I think for fans will look at him one way. I think administrators and people in the referee world will look at him a different way. I think his legacy as a whole could be viewed by everybody as incredibly impactful if he goes into this job and does what we all think he can and helps raise the level of refereeing in Major League Soccer. That's what I'm looking forward to. That's what I'm really hopeful for.
For Howard Webb to have a brain to pick like Mark Geiger's on a daily basis, to to help in the steering process and giving
to understand
advice
the
and helping.
American referee perspective, because Howard Webb doesn't have that. He didn't come up calling games at the local youth club and then working through the state association and then doing maybe college on the side as well, which is a whole separate animal, and then starting to get those lower level professional games here in the U.S. It's a different development process here than in England. So Howard Webb can try to understand that, and I'm sure he has done his best to understand that. But Mark Geiger lived it, and that's the difference. Mark Geiger can now go to state associations and talk to state associations about, hey, who are your 5 best referees? Who are your guys who have a potential to make a living at this? Let me talk to them. That's the stuff that Geiger is going to be able to do that maybe has been left out of it. I've talked for a long time about U.S. soccer needing to invest in referee development. And this is not a U.S. soccer investment. This is a professional referees organization investment, and I love it. And I hope U.S. soccer sees this and says, this is somebody that we need to work with. And if it's strengthening those ties between the federation and pro, the leagues and pro, whatever, Geiger can be a hugely important person in terms of refereeing in the United States getting better. And I really hope that in 20 years, and we're talking about Mark Geiger, we're talking about pro, we can point back to this and say, yep, that's why he's on that Mount Rushmore of referees in the United States. Not as much, or not even to diminish what he did on the field, but he can have 5-10 times the impact off the field in his profession, and that's what I'm excited to see. So I think it's a great move. Kudos to Pro for putting this together, and kudos to Mark to wanting to stay involved and wanting to help grow the game in a different way. I think it's a great thing all the way around. Let's take a break. More Thursday thoughts from you guys. Tweet at us on Twitter at @SoccerDownHere. Use the hashtag Thursday Thoughts. Send those in. We'll talk about more of your thoughts after this.
Sweet strawberry icing. You're in Goodwill, and just past that vintage denim jacket you spot miniature donut earrings. You lean in. Ah, that's the scent of shopping success. Because at Goodwill, every item you buy funds local job training and more. So bring home those donut earrings and bring home so much good to your community. Goodwill. Bring good home. Brought to you by Goodwill and the Ad Council.
Soccer Down Here is sponsored by Apolinski & Associates, LLC, personal injury lawyers with over 30 years of experience. Call Steve Apolinski at 518-350-4231 or email him at steve@aa-legal.com if you need help with a wrongful death or serious injury matter. Steve Apolinski is rated one of the top 100 trial attorneys in Georgia, recognized as Legal Elite by Georgia Trend magazine for being one of the most effective lawyers in Georgia.
Hamilton was adopted from a rescue in 2008. He really likes to be around people. I get out my mat and I'm doing a downward dog and he's underneath.
He's quite the pug about town. He gets invited to a lot of parties.
He knows he's a pretty big deal. Look at this little face. How could you not love him?
Hamilton the Pug, Instagram star and shelter pet. Amazing adoption stories start in shelters. Visit theshelterpetproject.org to find a pet near you. Brought to you by Maddie's Fund, the Humane Society of the United States, and the Ad Council.
As a business owner, you know that every year brings new challenges and opportunities. The success of your business demands expertise and focus. And Country Financial, issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
Welcome back. Soccer Down Here, January 10th, Thursday Thoughts edition. We know what 6 games are in the Atlanta United multi-game pack now. Cincinnati, March 10th. Orlando, May 12th. Chicago, June 1st. New York Red Bulls, July 7th. LA Galaxy, August 3rd. Columbus Crew, September 14th. That is your 2019 multi-game pack for Atlanta United. Little surprised Decision Day wasn't on there. I thought it would be. You could always see it added. it could be a situation where that one gets opened up the whole way and that gets added as well. But that's out there. So for fans who are not season ticket holders, who are looking to get into as many games as possible, your multi-game pack dates have been determined. So there you go. Next question on a Thursday Thoughts edition of the show. Can you outline the organizational structure at Atlanta United? This is from Chris Burns. Who reports to Darren, Carlos, and Frank DeBoer? Does Frank DeBoer report to Carlos? Who does Tony Annan report to? Curious to understand how Frank DeBoer puts his stamp on the club. Making assumptions here because I don't know exactly. But in general, when you have a technical director like Carlos Bocanegra, your first team coach is going to report to him. Your second team coach would report to him. That would be Scott Donnelly. And your academy director, Tony Annan, would report to him. So Tony has talked to us before about the consistency in meetings that have been had between that group. Academy, Atlanta United 2, Atlanta United, and Carlos. So just judging from the way it's generally set up, I would assume that that's the case here. That Frank, Scott, Tony report to Carlos. Carlos reports to Darren ultimately, although they work very much in tandem in terms of partnerships. So that would be my guess. Don't know if it's exactly that, and there could be certain situations where things get tweaked a little bit, but that's generally how it would go when you have a technical director. Now, some teams don't have a technical director. Some have a director of soccer. That can be a little more business related. In this case, I think that's the way it would flow out. So there you go. Josh Eisenberg asked about FC Cincinnati and what they think about college players. I honestly, we talked about the draft and we talked about the importance of it. And Jarrett's back with us, so I want to get his take on this. You know, FC Cincinnati has 7 picks in the first 37. We went through the roster. They have some spots where they need depth. I think the number 1 pick they need to get a little bit more than depth out of. I think they need to get somebody who's going to play some minutes. But beyond that, they have spots where they need depth. 7 picks in the first 37, we've talked about it before. It's a bit of a crapshoot when you talk about the draft, but you know, Philadelphia got the headlines for trading away all their draft picks. Jarrett, what did you think of the Cincinnati side of it where they picked up all these draft picks? What do you think it means as they build their roster out?
Maybe they're taking flyers, looking for depth. That's about all I can figure all you need to know about MLS's draft is that a team literally traded their entire draft away for less than Greg Garza. I mean, that's where we're at with the draft.
It's lottery tickets. I mean, except for the number 1 pick, it should. I mean, number 1 pick, you need to get somebody, but the others, it's kind of lottery tickets.
And there's no guarantee you're going to get somebody with the number 1 pick, though. Like when I think about draft successes, when I think about people being successful in the draft, what comes to mind for me is Gressel recently. Before that, Jack Harrison, Andre Blake, Kyle Laren while he was in the league.
No, Laren was a success. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. But those guys they're exceptions to the rule. They're not the rule. I mean, baseball is a crapshoot with the draft, and it looks like a home run compared to MLS's structure. I got to remember where I saw last night. There was a comment from somebody that was saying basically like, look, as academies have stepped up, colleges haven't taken the same steps in terms of, the development and the quality across the board. Sure, you've got individuals who step up, but the whole argument was, teams are going to are leaning more on their academy because, they can grow these players. They can get them to play the way they want, the system they want. They don't have to worry about the colleges doing it. And you have a similar thing in baseball sometimes where you would rather, depending on the organization, some organizations are there to take a kid out of high school because they can mold them and not have to worry about unteaching them anything at the college level that they might have picked up at the college level. Also, don't have to worry about wear and tear, which isn't as important in soccer, but, a lot of it has to do with, philosophy, and you don't have to unteach anything.
I'm still going to say that if you have the number 1 pick, you have to get you have to use it. You have to use it correctly, and you have to make it worthwhile because there is that talent out there. You know, let's go back a little bit. João Moutinho was traded from LAFC to Orlando. I don't know if anybody's figured out where to play him yet. That's a little bit of a concern. Abu Danladi was the 2017 number 1 pick. Little bit of a reach at the time, and we talked about that. Going back past that, though, Jack Harrison was 2016. Absolutely should have been the number 1 pick. Chicago picked him, flipped him to NYC. He was significant with NYC, and then they also brought in a significant amount of money for him. Right pick. Kyle Larin, 2015. Scored a bunch of goals. You brought in some money for him. Right pick. Andre Blake, 2014. You can't get much better than Andre Blake. I mean, you have a goalkeeper to build around as long as he's going to be here, and if you sell him and you make money, great. Andrew Farrell, 2013. Solid defender in this league for New England. 100% right pick. Andrew Winger has kind of bounced around a little bit. He was the 2012 number 1 pick from Montreal. A reach at number 1, at least in terms of what he's been as a pro. But, okay, he's been a pro. I mean, he's been a consistent pro. You can get a player who plays significant minutes for you at number 1, and I think you have to. The others are the ones, when you're talking about number 13, number 16, a bunch of early second-round picks, those are the crapshoots. But I put more of the issue with teams not getting contributors out of the draft down to poor scouting, lack of scouting, bad talent analysis, that type of stuff. Then there's just no talent in the draft. I think there's talent. I think you might have to look a little bit harder. I think you have to do your homework. And I don't know if every team does.
And that's it for me. It's homework. It's homework and scouting. And if you are put in a position where you can have an impactful selection and you don't make it, that's on you. And I view that more for the front office and the scouting department not doing their job as to anything else that would cause something like that to go wrong.
Chris Burns followed up on the organizational chart question. So part 2, education. What are the tasks that Carlos does day to day as technical director, VP? I don't know. I can't tell you that one. I have no idea. Does anybody else in MLS do it this way? In terms of having a technical director, yeah, it's becoming far more common. What's next for Carlos? I don't know. I don't think it's coaching. He didn't go down the coaching route. It feels like more of technical director, general manager, president of a club, those types of things is what it feels like. It feels like that's where his trajectory is. I don't know if he wants to coach. He hasn't done any of that just yet. Don't know if that's where he wants to be. I think he's done a very good job managing all of the pieces of Atlanta United. And I think where he's been incredibly valuable, he has gotten credit, and I think he deserves to get more credit, is making Atlanta United a club that players want to come to. And his background as a player has been vital in that. And I don't think every club, again, it's one of those things that I think Atlanta's gotten right that other clubs don't invest the time and energy into. He makes it easy for players to move to Atlanta. He's focused on things that just make it easier for players to be players and focus on their job and focus on work and not have to worry about all of the other stuff about, well, I don't know how to find an apartment here. I don't know how to find out about the schools for my kids. I don't know what to do about getting a car. The club has people and has connections to help with all of those things. Not every club does. And I think a lot of that's down to Carlos and the work that he's done. So I agree. I mean, I agree with Chris. Love him, don't want to lose him, trying to understand how we do it differently. I don't think Atlanta does it in some dramatic, different way in terms of a club structure. I think they just made really good hires. And I think they made smart hires from the top down, and people are allowed to do their jobs and do them effectively, and they have. I don't think it's anything about club structure that's made Atlanta like what it is. I think it's the people have made Atlanta United what it is. Andrew Baker, before we go to break, said, Chelsea have 37 players out on loan. What's stopping us from having more players than our first or second team and loaning them out to lower league clubs in America and abroad? Do you really want to do that? That would be what would stop me. Is that the model? Also, FIFA's trying to say, no, you shouldn't do this. This is not a good thing. So that's one reason why I don't think it's going to happen. Do you want to buy up a bunch of guys and loan them to USL clubs? I don't know if there's a ton of value there. As your academy grows, that could be a conversation because you could have more guys coming through your academy that you would like to keep in the fold and keep tabs on and keep control of. But I don't think you want to go pick up a bunch of players from other countries and bring them here and loan them out. That's a whole nother level of management. How much has Chelsea truly benefited from it would be my question. Because I don't know if they have.
Not much.
I mean, like Matt Miazga at Chelsea. What's been the good of that? I don't know if it's going to matter. And Manchester City's doing some of that. I want to see how FIFA deals with this first because I think they're going to. And we'll see how it goes down. But where I could see Atlanta United expand in terms of having more players under contract and loaned out would be with academy signings that start in USL League One. I could see a situation like that where you want to get a guy under contract because you don't want to see him leave, but he's not ready for your second team. You're not sure if he's ready for the second division level in general. You sign him to a pro deal and you loan him to a Tormenta or a Greenville or a Chattanooga or elsewhere in USL League One because you want to be able to not lose that player for nothing. And speaking of that, there's a player from the academy, Chad Letts, who was in Philadelphia as well at one point. Letts had a good U19 season. He signed with a second division club in Belgium, Union Saint-Gilloise. It's a free. It's on a free. So do you want to prevent those situations and maybe make a little bit of money on these types of deals? Okay. Then you could sign a few more and I think loan them to League One teams and championship teams. But never going to be 37 guys like Chelsea because I think FIFA's going to rule against that. And before we go to our final break, Jarrett, news for you. According to Celtic Bible, Andrew Gutman and Manny Perez are both done deals. 2 young American players going to Celtic.
The Scottish invasion reversed is in full effect.
It's looking like it. Celtic has 3 American players. Weah Perez, who's a US U20 right back, who's played for Asheville City, our friends up in the NPSL, and now Indiana University and Herman Trophy winning left back Andrew Gutman.
And you need some at the right back side right now because Swedish international Mikael Lustig, the funniest wannabe cop in Scotland, is the sun is setting on him. So you got to start looking towards the future. And the left back's going to be interesting. Left back would be interesting though with Gutman, just because you have Kieran Tierney, who's really, really good, but is going to start demanding a lot of attention. And they're in the similar boat that Ajax has been in for a long time, where when the big clubs come calling, you listen.
And now they've upgraded with guys behind them. Perez, who, I mean, if Perez goes and makes the most of it, Perez is a guy, right back's a position with the national team that you could absolutely see him get a shout. And Gutman on the left side, same thing. So more young Americans now at Celtic. Craziness.
The Scottish inversion.
All right, let's take our final break, come back, wrap everything up on a Thursday Thoughts edition after this.
The average time a resume spends on an HR manager's desk is 7 seconds, and most of them are tossed aside. Now imagine if one of those resumes belonged to Yasmin, who was
living in a shelter, juggling 3 jobs. I had to be resilient. That's something that you can't teach.
We rely so much on a resume, yet it could never tell the full story of someone who
had to be independent and take initiative. and that's how I handle every project I get.
Discover new ways to develop great talent at gradsoflife.org. Brought to you by Grads of Life and the Ad Council.
We know that every driver is different, and a one-size policy does not fit all. That's why Country Financial offers a variety of discounts, so you get the coverage you need and the savings you deserve. From good driver to good student, multi-policy to multi-car, we've got a discount to suit every driver. Call Jason Wright at 678-568-6871 today to see what you could save. On Facebook at Jason Wright Agency or by phone at 678-568-6871. Discounts vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Country Preferred Insurance Company, or Country Casualty Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
Hey, hon, what you doing with your phone? Taking pictures?
No, I'm asking it questions.
Like what?
Hey, Bobo, do flowers have best friends?
I'm sorry. I'm afraid I don't know that.
Hey, follow me. I want to show you something. Look, flowers do have best friends.
Whoa.
Some answers can only be found in nature. Discover the unsearchable. Visit discovertheforest.org to find a trail near you. Brought to you by the United States Forest Service and the Ad Council.
Soccer Down Here is sponsored by Appolinsky & Associates, LLC, personal injury lawyers with over 30 years of experience. Call Steve Appolinsky at 518-350-4231 or email him at steve@aa-legal.com if you need help with a wrongful death or serious injury matter. Steve Appolinsky is rated one of the top 100 trial attorneys in Georgia, recognized as legal elite by Georgia Trend magazine for being one of the most effective lawyers in Georgia.
Final segment, Soccer Down Here, January 10th, Thursday Thoughts type of show. El Mataflow had a Thursday thought. Tickets for the June 5th Mexico match at Mercedes-Benz Stadium, Tata Martino's return to the Benz, go on sale next week and will most likely sell out quickly. How amazing is that? Pretty cool to see Tata back at the Benz so quickly. I'm down with this. I like this.
It is. It's also pretty cool to see Mexico playing in one of the, hottest soccer towns in America in a brand new stadium before the either U.S. national team does.
Yeah. U.S. Soccer Federation. Do you like money?
Yo.
Would you like to make money? You might want to book a game.
We know you like money because we see how much tickets cost to go to a friendly.
This is true. Would you like to play in the city that is drawing more fans than anybody else? You should probably go ahead and book a game. And I know people are going to be like, well, turf and blah, blah. You're going to bring in grass, and you're going to pay to bring in grass, and you're still going to make a stupid amount of money. Do it. Make it happen. Why did you not play a pre-Gold Cup game here? Why is Mexico playing that pre-Gold Cup game here and not the United States? What are you doing? Why U.S. soccer, and we'll talk about the women in a second, why on the men's side have you not booked a United States men's national team match in Atlanta since 1977?
Ugh.
CONCACAF Gold Cup and the U.S. being here in a semifinal is not the same thing. U.S. soccer, you had nothing to do with it. Don't take any credit. You have booked 2 U.S. men's national team games in Atlanta, Georgia, period, ever. 1977 and 1968. And the only reason you did 1968 is because you didn't have a coach and you turned to Phil Woosenham, who had just won the championship, and said, yeah, can you fix this and try to get us to a World Cup? And even Phil wasn't able to pull that one off. That's it. You've never played a full men's national team game in Atlanta that U.S. soccer booked any other time. It's crazy. Now, it's inexcusable. So fix that, please. And on the women's side, now there will likely be a tour after the World Cup. We don't know anything detail-wise about dates and times and cities and all that. I will reserve judgment until we see how that goes. And some of that's going to be down to how the team performs as well. I think the length of the tour is based on how they do. If they win, probably going to be a longer tour, more games, and more money. If it's not a good World Cup, then it's probably going to be a much shorter tour. Does Atlanta factor into that on the women's side? It absolutely should. So U.S. Soccer Federation, we are looking at you from Atlanta, Georgia, and wondering why you don't want to play games here. Could you please fix that? Thank you.
We took a trophy to Magic City. What more do you want?
Oh, there you go. I don't think U.S. Soccer cares about that part. The Colonel, about preseason, his Thursday thoughts. Will all of preseason be in California? Will there be a Mexican opponent? Who, when should we expect an announcement? I don't know. I would expect that it would probably be part of the Monday media availability at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta Training Ground to kick off preseason. Sounds like at least a good bit of it will be in California, but I don't know if all of it. I don't know how all of it's going to play out. So I would expect that announcement on Monday. That would be my guess. But I don't know anything else, Colonel. Sorry. The Garlic Bread Warlord shared that Ajax has reached an agreement with Club America's Diego Lainez. There was, and the reason we're talking about this is because Real Betis was chasing him. Betis, now that they have not gotten Lainez, could double down on their interest when it refers to Miguel Almiron. So stay tuned there. Andy Hollums, and wow, this is like bigger than a stoppage time question, but Andy, we're going to introduce it here, and we will probably talk a little bit more about it tomorrow. Andy says, if FIFA rules that the U.S. Soccer Federation has to enforce solidarity payments, could colleges actually receive money for time players spend there? Would the potential revenue make NCAA take soccer more seriously? No, they wouldn't, and this is actually an easy answer, but we'll talk solidarity payments as a whole tomorrow. They wouldn't because NCAA soccer, NAIA soccer, college soccer as a whole is not part of FIFA. It is not part of the U.S. Soccer Federation. It is not part of state associations. It is basically unregulated according to FIFA. That's why they play different rules. That's why substitutions are different. That's why it's a whole different animal. It's why referees have to be certified by completely different governing bodies. So the college time would have nothing to do with this because it is basically seen as unsanctioned soccer. So that Andy's question specifically about solidarity payments, colleges would get nothing. Solidarity payments as a whole is a conversation, and we'll see as we get closer to any kind of rulings or anything. But we'll talk about that as a whole because I know it's a topic that's starting to get more traction, and I don't know if it's fully understood by everybody, including me and including us, because it is a very complicated situation. We'll do our best to explain where things stand tomorrow, and we'll get into that in the first hour tomorrow. Scrolling through, Lewis Martin wants Smokey Bear to make a comeback. I think we can oblige our friend Lewis on that one. Smokey Bear does need to make a comeback. It's been a little while since we've heard from Lewis and from Smokey. Anything else, guys, as we wrap up on a Thursday Thoughts edition of the show? Patrick wants to know, and Jarrett, you might be able to answer this. Why is Celtic signing every American player they can?
I don't know. I honestly don't. Well, I mean, Tim Weah played for PSG, so there's still that kind of the French connection, so that might kind of fits with what Brendan Rodgers might want.
They tried to sign Darlington Nagbe before.
Yeah. Maybe it just so happens that the guys are looking to fill the void. Happen to be from the same country, because I honestly don't know. I'm kind of baffled by it, and I think it's hilarious. Mostly because now, you know who else has to love this, honestly, is Bleacher Report. How many random people you think now are going to, drop, what is it? How much is it? Like $1.99, $2.99 to watch a single game?
Yeah, $3 a game.
Yeah, $3 a game. How many people are going to drop that $3 a game to watch Tim Weah play, Hearts of Midlothian?
Quite a few.
Yes. They got to love this.
That's a lot of cheeseburgers.
That is a lot of cheeseburgers. Man, they're going to cater their holiday party with the Vortex over there at Bleacher Report.
Because of Tim Weah.
Yes.
I like it.
Because of
Send
Tim Weah.
Send him a cheeseburger while they're at it.
Because of Tim Weah being in a title chase in Scotland. Because that's what 2019 is. Also, speaking of the Atlanta thing with, like, we took the trophy to Magic City. A side note, how dangerous is it going to be when the World Cup is actually here? And, like, the night before a World Cup semifinal.
The trophy won't be here. It's semi. It's safe.
No.
You're good.
No, it's not the trophy I'm worried about. It's the players.
There are lots of coaches who have very strict rules on what their players can and cannot do during these types of events. So I think it'll be okay. We haven't heard about any of those types of things in terms of MLS. We've not heard about the Buckhead flu or any other flus making an appearance like they do sometimes in the NBA with the schedule and how it falls. So I think it'll be okay, but we'll see. We got a few years till we get there, so we'll see how that goes down. Maybe we'll have some more incidents before then. Who knows? That's it for a Thursday Thoughts edition of the show. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for all the questions. We'll get into solidarity payments and other stuff like that on Friday's show. We'll also have a Friday flashback topic for you in the morning. If you have suggestions, we will take them as well on Twitter at @SoccerDownHere. Thanks, y'all. Mucha plata, y'all.
Mucha plata, y'all.
Mucha plata, y'all.